Who appoints the people who interpret our laws? I mean, think about it. Who decides which judge sits on which bench? It's one of the most crucial questions for any democracy. And in India, the answer is a unique, powerful, and, let's be honest, a very controversial system called the Collegium. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain. We'll get into how it was created, why it exists, and why it's at the center of this constant tug-of-war between the government and the judiciary. So let's dive right in and figure out how this whole thing actually works.
But why are we talking about this right now? Well, you know how it is. Sometimes these huge constitutional debates get kicked off by one single event. And in this case, it all comes down to a simple question. Why did the transfer of one high court judge suddenly become this massive national controversy, making everyone question the independence of our entire judicial system?
So meet Justice Atul Sridharan. In late 2023, the Supreme Court Collegium did something pretty unusual. They first recommended he be transferred to one high court. But then, after what was called a request from the central government, they publicly changed their minds and sent him somewhere else. Now that one move lit a fire, and the whole debate about government influence over judges came roaring back to life.
So, to really get to the bottom of what happened with Justice Sridharan, we need to understand the whole system. Here's the game plan for today. We'll start with the transfer itself. Then we'll tackle the basics. What is the Collegium? We'll then travel back in time to the 3 judges' cases that actually created it, look at the cracks that have appeared in the system, explore the hunt for a solution, and finally, we'll weigh in on that big classic debate: independence versus accountability. Okay, let's start with the absolute basics. We've been throwing this word around, but what on earth is this Collegium system? To put it simply, the Collegium system is how judges in India's Supreme Court and high courts get their jobs and get transferred. It's basically a committee headed by the Chief Justice of India and the 4 other most senior Supreme Court judges. But here's the absolute kicker, the most important part. You will not find the word collegium anywhere in the Indian Constitution. It wasn't made by an act of parliament. It was created by the judiciary for the judiciary through a series of landmark court judgments.
So you might be wondering, why did the Supreme Court feel the need to create its own system? Well, the answer comes down to one core idea: protecting the judiciary's integrity. The goal was to build a firewall, right? To make sure that judges could make decisions based on the law, not because they were afraid of political pressure. This was meant to guarantee judicial independence, block political interference, and maintain that fundamental principle of separation of powers. The idea was to make sure that a judge's appointment is based on merit, not on who they happen to know in the government.
Now, this system didn't just appear out of thin air. It was forged in the fire of 3 massive legal battles between the judiciary and the government. These are famously known as the 3 judges' cases. This is basically the story of how the judiciary took control of its own house.
And this timeline shows you exactly how that power shift happened. It all started back in 1981 with the first judges' case. Here, the court said the government only had to consult the Chief Justice, which basically gave the government the final word. But then came the big one, the game changer, in 1993, the second judges' case. The court did a complete 180, declaring that the Chief Justice's opinion was supreme. This is the moment the Collegium was born. It started with the CJI plus 2 senior judges. And finally, in 1998, the third judges' case expanded it to what we have today, the CJI plus the 4 senior-most judges.
And this, right here, perfectly shows you just how massive that shift was. Before 1993, the scales were tipped heavily in favor of the executive. The government had the final say. But after that second judges' case, the scales tipped dramatically the other way. The judiciary said, nope, we're in charge now, creating a system where judges would, for all practical purposes, appoint other judges.
So you have a system designed to protect judges from political pressure and make sure appointments are based on merit. Sounds perfect on paper, right? Well, not exactly. Over the decades, this system, run by judges for judges, has developed some really serious cracks and led to a bunch of problems no one really saw coming.
Let's start with a single, pretty shocking number: 327. As of early 2024, that's how many judge positions were vacant in India's high courts. Now, this isn't just a number on a page. It represents a crushing delay in justice for countless people who are just waiting for their cases to be heard.
And this chart really puts that number into perspective. We're talking about a vacancy rate of nearly 30%. Think about it. Almost 1 in every 3 chairs for a high court judge in this country is empty. This raises a pretty big question. Is the Collegium system actually failing at one of its most basic jobs?
And if we zoom out from just the high courts, the picture gets even scarier. Across our entire judicial system, we are looking at over 5,000 vacant positions. This creates a massive bottleneck, and it's one of the main reasons for the massive backlog of cases our courts are famous for. So why is this happening?
Well, this brings us to the core criticisms. A system that was designed to stop political influence has, according to many, created its own little insulated bubble. The first major issue is a massive lack of transparency. The meetings are secret. There are no official minutes, no published criteria for who gets picked. This leads to the second problem. There's no accountability. If a bad appointment is made, who do you complain to? And this secrecy has fueled allegations of nepotism, with many calling it an old boys club. And, as we just saw, the system is clearly struggling to just fill vacancies on time.
And look, this criticism isn't just coming from activists or lawyers. This is a direct quote from the union law minister, who has publicly called the judiciary's appointment process opaque. That single word captures the deep, ongoing tension between the government and the judiciary over who should be in control here.
So, you've got a system with a noble goal but some very serious flaws. This, naturally, has led to people trying to reform it. And that brings us to the biggest challenge the Collegium has ever faced, the hunt for a better solution.
Enter the NJAC, or the National Judicial Appointments Commission. Back in 2014, the Parliament actually amended the Constitution to get rid of the Collegium and bring in this new body. The idea was to create a more balanced commission, with the Chief Justice, other senior judges, the law minister, and two eminent persons from outside the legal world. But in 2015, the Supreme Court struck down the NJAC, saying that having the government involved was a threat to the independence of the judiciary.
This table really shows you the different trade-offs. The Collegium system gives all the power to the judiciary, but you lose out on transparency and public accountability. The NJAC tried to create a hybrid model to balance these things out. And then you have a completely different model like the U.S. system, where the president appoints judges, but the whole process is subject to intense public and legislative checking. Each system prioritizes something different.
So, with the NJAC off the table, what's next? Well, a lot of people are suggesting that we can fix the current system from within. First, boost transparency. Just publish the selection criteria and the minutes of the meetings. Second, create some accountability with a proper complaints mechanism. Third, widen the circle of consultation. Maybe talk to bodies like the Bar Council. Fourth, set strict timelines to cut down on the delays. And finally, make a real conscious effort to promote diversity so that our courts actually reflect the society they serve.
And all of this brings us right back to the core dilemma at the heart of this entire debate. It's a classic constitutional balancing act that, honestly, countries all over the world are struggling with.
The whole issue really boils down to this. On one side of the scale, you have the absolute necessity of an independent judiciary, one that is shielded from political pressure. But on the other side, you have the democratic demand for transparency and accountability. The public has a right to know how the guardians of our Constitution are being chosen, and the system needs to be answerable for its decisions.
And this is the fundamental question we want to leave you with today. Can India find that perfect middle path? Is it even possible to design a system that secures the judiciary's independence from the government, while also making sure that the whole appointment process is transparent, accountable, and ultimately wins the trust of the public? The answer to that is going to shape the future of Indian democracy.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but believe me, we've only scratched the surface of this incredibly complex topic. If you want to dig deeper into all the arguments, we've created very detailed notes and a handy quick revision mind map on the Collegium system. To get your hands on them, just click the link in the description and head over to our website. Thanks so much for watching.